Good evening, folks. Thank you for coming in. Is Kevin in?
Right here.
Kevin's going to introduce us.
I'd like to say a few words. And a few words is just a few words. Anyway, happy to be hosting this informational meeting for the patrons of the district. We've got a different team in here running this fire, the Pacific Northwest team number 2. And welcome to them. And they're going to be giving the information to one and all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, folks. My name is Brian Lawatch. I am a public information officer with Pacific Northwest Team 2. I live and work nearby in Medford, Oregon. I'd like to thank you all for coming to this meeting. I'd like to thank our digital audience online as well, because we're recording this for Facebook and NCWeb. There's a couple folks here I'd just like to acknowledge their presence. We have Tim Freeman, Douglas County Commissioner. Kevin Keogh, who you just saw. He's the chief of the Tiller Fire Station here. Is Cliff Riggs or Don Jeskian?
They have training.
Okay. They told me they might come tonight. They're the chiefs and the assistant chief over at Milo. Kathy Miner, district ranger here across the river at the Tiller Ranger District. Ann Neeson, agency representative with the Forest Service. Lindsay Babcock, the BLM agency administrator. And Dan Hoffey, Office of Public Health. Close enough. And well, we're here today to give you guys an operational briefing of the work we're here to do and the work we've been doing. We have some people from the command staff on Pacific Northwest Team 2. You're going to hear from our incident commander, Chris Schulte. You're going to hear from Operations Section Chief Troy Parrish. You're going to hear from our incident meteorologist, Phil Manuel. And then after that, I'm going to come back on stage and we're going to take some questions from the audience. So if you could just hold your questions till then. And afterwards, when the meeting's over, we're going to break off and we're going to have people standing by the maps ready to answer any questions you have and just talk about the fire. I expect this meeting to last about an hour. I want to remind you all that we do have some handouts over there with Firewise information, the most recent update on the fire, and some maps. And also we have bottles of water there in the back. And your exits are these giant doors over here. So, and if you have any needs to use a restroom, there is one in that room over to the right. So, it's out of service. We don't have a restroom.
Well, I'll interject. If you really have to go, gals, there's one over at the Tiller Ranger Station if you can't hold it. Fellas, there's plenty of bushes behind the fire hall here. Welcome to Tiller. Welcome to Tiller.
With that, I would like to introduce Kathy Miner, District Ranger here over at the Tiller Ranger Station, real quick.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. It's been a while since we had a public meeting about the fires, so we thought we'd have one to kind of update you guys where we are. And I wanted to say special thanks to Chris Schulte's team, who's done a great job in really getting control of the fire and making progress. And so you're going to hear more about where we are with that from him later on today. And I wanted to introduce Lindsay Babcock from the BLM to speak on that side of the fire.
Thanks, Kathy. Hi, I'm Lindsay Babcock. I'm an agency administrator with the BLM, and I'm actually standing in tonight for Teresa Trulock, who is the field manager that's responsible for these BLM lands near the southern end of the fire. She wanted to be here, but she actually got pulled off on the Ramsey fire, so I'm providing her a little bit of relief this week. I had the opportunity to take a trip down to the south end of the fire, and I'll let the operations folks speak more to the details of what's going on, but I didn't even see one smoke down there today, so I was feeling really good about it. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the BLM and the Forest Service have been working hand in hand with ODF on this fire. we're going to keep working that way after all the teams are gone in a couple weeks or months or whatever it takes, and we're going to work together on the suppression repair and make sure that after these teams are gone, we are addressing what's left as soon as possible. Other than that, I will turn the mic over to Chris Schulte and give him a big thank you to him and his team for everything they've done.
Thank you, Lindsay. Good evening, everybody. As has been said, my name is Chris Schulte. I'm the Incident Commander for Pacific Northwest Team Number 2. We inherited this fire from the ODF and the Northern Rockies team that were in place, and it was in pretty darn good shape when we got here. So I appreciate the thanks and the acknowledgments, but there was an awful lot of work done before we arrived, and we just complimented that and slid in. And the local fire districts also, I'm sure that you guys were up to your eyeballs for weeks with this thing. So we recognize that, and we're very pleased and honored to be here to help try to finish it up. So I'm allowed to point at a map only a couple of times a week, according to the operations people, but if I may, thank you. We inherited a piece of ground in here along the 6640 road, and then another piece of open line over here, open in that it was not black all the way to the line, so therefore it has unburned fuel from the fire's edge to the perimeter or proposed perimeter, and until it's removed, we still consider it as a threat to escape and jump across the line. So we were able to fire with aerial ignition and ground ignitions along in this area here. And then we went over here with the local district experts from the ranger stations, and they decided, and we concluded also, that it's best not to fire that piece of ground. The vegetation in there is not as inclined to burn as some because of the high elevation. There's not an awful lot of ground fuel in there, and we didn't have the correct weather pattern coming at us. So we thought it would be best if we not put fire on the ground in there and then end up having an escape. So that's about as far as I'm going to get into on the operational end of things. Here's your pointer. I won't point at your map again, Troy, okay? Troy is a young operations chief trainee, and he's doing a fantastic job in the last 3 or 4 days I've been watching him. So I'm a fire chief at home, so I'm honored to be here and see your station and your apparatus. I actually have used to have a Western States truck pretty darn similar to that one, so it's kind of nice to be here. Let me see, what else did I want to share with you? The Pacific Northwest Team Number 2 travels with a full complement. We are one of 16 national teams. We are tasked with the more complex incidents that are out there and available, and we don't usually do an awful lot of initial attack like the Oregon Department of Forestry did yesterday on this fire down on the main highway corridor. They were initial attack, and now they're extended attacking. And if that fire continues to grow, that's when they activate a team to come in and start to work on a long-term project that needs logistic support. We travel with a plans chief, a finance chief, an operations chief, and what other chief am I? Where's Sarah? She's always so helpful. And a logistics chief, thank you. And then we also have a safety officer, a public information officer, and liaison officers. So that's our command and general staff, and those people all have staffs, and we travel usually with 75 to 90 people on our team. And we can deal with the fires of this complexity and probably 1.5 or so more of these. We come with a lot of capacity, a lot of operational capacity, and we always bring in as many trainees as we can because this fire suppression business is a long-term commitment, and you get the old guys with the great temples. We stop doing it after a while, and we need to train the next generation to know how to do it well also. So the fire is doing real well. We inherited it in great shape. The ops folks have made some great progress on the open line portions. There is now another thing we do an awful lot of is we transfer command from one group to another, and there is now talk of transferring the command of this fire to another group. That's not finalized as yet, but that's the kind of thing that gets preloaded 3 or 4 days ahead of schedule. And so there's been an order placed for another team to come in here and then replace us. So that's probably 3 or 4 days out. But we would not be doing that if the fire wasn't in great shape. That's the main motivator that has inspired us to recommend that the next level of complexity would be appropriate. So once again, it's a privilege to be here and talk with you tonight. I feel the IC job, this is probably just about as an important part of my job as any, and I'll be sticking around afterwards and answer any questions that anybody might have. Thank you.
First, I'm going to give a brief disclaimer. I'm left-handed, so it's hard for me to do things with the opposite hand. Second, I've had a cold for probably 20 days, and I got my voice back this morning for the most part, but if I fall out and stumble, just bear with me and I'll get right back. See, I practiced this with the left hand and it worked way better than the right hand. Okay, to start us off, you guys have been here a lot longer, and I'm animated, so I might move the mic away from my face several times, but I'll bring it back, I promise. So around July 15th, as you know, the fires started with some lightning. Sorry about that, bug just landed on my ear. Several lightning fires started July 15th-ish. Teams were activated. They jumped on them. They caught some of them. Some aren't even on the map. They've caught since the lightning started. And teams came in. They did a great job wrapping it up, catching this branch 1 area down in the BLM ODF country. And then we showed up and we proceeded with the operations side. So when we came here, like Chris said, there was the Oregon Department of Forestry and they had branch 1. They have since turned that over to our incident management team, PNW 2. I'm sorry, I'm Troy Parrish, branch director, PNW 2. Missed that part. And we have took over operations down here. So briefly, branch 1, like Chris said, mop up, patrol, rehabilitation. Sorry, there's an X I'm supposed to stand on. I missed it. And yesterday with that Ramsey Canyon fire, we sent a bunch of resources down there to help out. Once they get that wrapped up, they'll be back and continue with their work. Up here in the Elk Creek drainage area, same, mop up, patrol, monitor, things are looking great. Chris covered November up in the Woodcock Cabin area, I believe is what it's called. I haven't been over there. And they're doing great work. Built that catcher's mitt just in case the Columbus fire makes a run this direction. Unlikely, but in the case it does, it'll be able to catch that and will lessen the chances of escaping the perimeter. This is the branch that we're at, Tiller area. Branch 2 covers from up here in Skookum Pond all the way down to, I believe it's called Devil's Knob. So that whole area is branch 2, and that's the area that I primarily spend most of my time. Delta Foxtrot, the Devil's Knob area, it is in patrol mop-up status, looking great. They also go down and check on the snowshoe fire. We haven't had any issues there, and since we've been here, there's been a couple smokes really far interior. Hasn't been an issue. Up in the heart of branch 2, the hotel area, also Butler Butte. Like Chris was saying earlier, the fire really doesn't want to move through that greener fuels. There's a lot of fresher fir plantations, and it's hanging up in there. It's not really moving. Burning it would probably just cause us more problems. This section up here, the 700, 800 road that runs kind of the middle of the fire, excuse me, the gap between the two fires, it's a little more receptive, but still hasn't really moved, and we don't anticipate it moving much unless there was some kind of really hot, low humidity, high atmospheric day with a strong wind, and that doesn't look predicted for quite a while. The weather guy will tell you about that next. up in around the area of the world's tallest sugar pine. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with that area. It is looking fantastic. The crews up there have mopped it up, patrolled it. They hang out around that area very often, making sure that it's not going to get into that anywhere near that sugar pine. Along with that, the 68 road, they're making sure that they keep that road open for access. It's a great road for us to get from one side of the fire to the next, and so we're keeping fallers up there, we're keeping equipment up there, and we're ensuring that that stays open. And that pretty much wraps up the gist of the fire. Again, we'll be up here afterwards to answer questions more specifically. I'll be able to help you on anything. If you have one specific spot and you have a question about it, it'd be a lot easier for me to just talk to you individually.
Good evening. My name is Phil Manuel. I'm an incident meteorologist. I work for the National Weather Service. I was here roughly 3 years ago, I believe. We had a fire in Stouts Creek, down the river a bit. I think we had a camp close to Days Creek. So I've been here before. I wished I could see it without all the smoke. It's a beautiful area. Why do we have an incident meteorologist with this team, or any other team for that matter? There are two scientists or two specialists that you'll find on every large fire, or every large fire that has a team of this size. And our job is to support that team in terms of where the fire may burn next. The fire behavior analyst's job is to look at what it's burning. Just like any campfire, when you put sticks and twigs in a campfire, depending on what you burn, makes that fire hotter or cooler. So that fire behavior analyst is going out there and looking at what's actually burning. In terms of the weather, though, like any campfire, if you wet the campfire down, it goes out. If you take the sticks and twigs out of the campfire, it'll stop burning. Well, the same thing happens here. We go out and we look for areas where you have a lot of trees, a lot of things that'll burn, and we also look at how the weather impacts what is burning. So my job in terms of the weather is to say, okay, how much rain have we had? How many of you got rain gauges? Show of hands. When was the last time it rained here? A long time. I looked in June. I looked back at one of the weather stations here pretty close by, and it has been 76 days since there was meaningful rainfall here. You deprive any vegetation out there 76 days without water, and it's going to burn. And that number is going to continue to go up. So, in terms of the past weather, we've gone 76 days. Where do we go from here? Current weather pattern that we're in, we've got cooler weather. Everybody's heard the forecast. We've got cold fronts coming through. But one thing you're not hearing is moisture. Just because the air is cooler doesn't mean it won't keep burning. Just like any campfire, I haven't poured any water on it yet, so it's not going to go out. The cool thing about it is with all these teams that have come in a sense, they've built a ring around these fires. With the exception of a couple of places. We have the Columbus fire up here and the Miles fire here. And based on what the fire behavior analyst, the other scientists that I work with on the team, and myself, based on the weather, even up at around 4,000 or 5,000 feet, those fires will burn together. They're only about 3/4 of a mile apart. They will burn together because we don't have any rain in the forecast. You heard the term catcher's mitt. Their burning operations the last couple of days with that easterly wind that we had allowed them to do some burning. Easterly winds pushed their smoke back over into that area. So now what we've done is we've built that catcher's mitt. Why is it a catcher's mitt? You see this area up here? That's the old burn from, I believe, last year. it's not going to burn again. It's just like a campfire. I've removed all the sticks and twigs and stuff that'll burn out, so this won't burn. This is already burned. Here's an old fire scar. That won't burn. So now essentially what you're left with is this little piece of real estate right up here that's got to burn together. And it's up really high. It's 4,000 or 5,000 feet up. Well, for every 1,000 feet you go up, it's 4 or 5 degrees cooler. So on any given day, even if it's 90 degrees down here, it may only be 70 degrees up there. So it burns slower up there. So at some point it'll burn together. And then the idea is not to come out over here. And then we continue to watch it over here on this ridge line, the Umpqua Divide. And we got a special person out there watching out for you. He's over at the Picket Butte Lookout. I went up there and talked to him yesterday and then last week, and he's got his eyes glued to this ridge line over here. So that if anything does happen to come out, he's going to let you know about it. Something to keep in mind. We've reached kind of the peak of fire season in the sense of the hottest temperatures. In terms of rainfall, though, you may not get any rain until maybe the 3rd or 4th week of September. So we still got a full month. And even though we got cooler temperatures, we're still not putting any water on it. What I do want you to keep in mind is when these fronts come through, the smoke will clear. A lot of the smoke that you see out here is not ours. It's from fires everywhere else that's burning. Rest of Oregon, Washington, Western Canada, there's hundreds of fires out there. And as these fronts come through, they circulate the air and you get smoke from other fires. But this fire in particular, when we get westerly winds and they sweep through, we get air off the Pacific Ocean and the smoke clears. And what you're going to find is this fire, until it rains on it, you're going to continue to see smokes coming up from stumps, from trees in the interior that continue to burn, the big heavier stuff, the big logs are going to keep burning. And then at some point it's going to rain. Keep in the back of your mind as you go through the winter is like you've done with this burn and this particular burn, some of the burns that you've experienced in the river valley in the past. When it rains, it can rain heavy. So during the winter months, don't be surprised to see extra water come off of, say, the Columbus fire and run down Jackson Creek. So you will tend to have a little bit more of a flood threat in there during the winter months because there's nothing to hold the water on the ground. When you burn everything off and it rains, it'll run off quicker, just like running off the driveway out here or off your sidewalk. So until next spring, when you get vegetation back on that piece of landscape, watch out for the water threat in terms of if you're going up in here, some of these roads may be compromised in terms of getting washed out easier than they would if you didn't have the fire at all. Especially not so much on this side, but this Elk Creek drainage where you've got a bigger footprint. You've got a lot of small streams that are running into that Elk Creek drainage. Again, as said before, we'll be around afterwards. I am more than happy to answer weather questions. I use all kinds of special toys to look at stuff like this. We have satellites, we have radar, and we can see things that go on in here that you can't see with the naked eye. So I welcome you up for questions afterwards.
Okay, I'm going to open the floor to questions that you may have for any one of our fire professionals here. Yeah, if there's a question that's... Any questions? And if you don't want to ask a question now, we will be hanging out by the maps ready to talk to you.
I've got one. What's the fire behavior there in that unburned area between the Columbus fire and Miles fire there?
You wanted to know what
Can you generalize it, or?
the fire activity is right in here?
Correct, yeah. What's that
Okay.
gonna look like in the next few weeks until it rains or it burns together?
Have you been there before by any chance? Okay.
But not during this event.
Okay, so my trip through there, I've been through there one time, and it was like a huckleberry patch. You know, it's green, it's got tall, lush grass. That being said, there's a lot of dead material in there. There were spots, you know, where the fire has lofted an ember and landed in a log, and then since burned it up. So, I mean, he's the fire behavior prediction guy, but what I was seeing in there, I would think it would slowly move through there, through the heavies, the down logs, anything dead. Everything else is green and.
Can I add to that?
Sure, you can add to that. And that, from my perspective, I've only been to the center of that area you asked me about.
I have not physically been there, but I did get, in a discussion with Ops Chief who was out there, and he was talking about how the vegetation is different than most of the rest of the place. And I recalled on the spring fire in '96, I had a vegetation. It was these large bulbous flowers. They looked kind of like a sunflower, and we had fire slam into that veg type, and it dropped down and just kind of spotted around in the duff and wouldn't burn anymore. And then on the apple tiller fire when I was here, we ran into a big swath of that vegetation also, and it did not burn. And we tried to burn it that year. We were trying to secure the road, and we couldn't get it going. And then I asked the ops chief, next time you're in there, if you take some pictures, I want to confirm if that same flower and that same vegetation characteristic is there. And he brought back the next day, and it's the same stuff. So in my different times on this landscape and this veg type, I would predict that Troy is 100% correct. You're going to have some down logs and a little duff burning, but you're not going to be able to get a broadcast fire going in there at all.
It's really similar down here where they did that burnout. It's mosaic, if you've heard that term before. So anything that can burn has been burned on the ground, and anything that can't is not going to be receptive. That being said, it always can be. You know, you ever hedge your bets on that it's invincible, or we just walk away. So we know better than that. But in general, it's not going to be like when it blew down through Alco Rock.
Are there any other questions?
I got a question. I just moved here, and I'm not familiar with the fires and everything. Now, with the brown part to where, okay, you said that's burnt out.
Yeah, it's from a fire previously.
So how come it doesn't catch back on fire?
I
So-
can handle it if you want.
Go ahead.
The question was, we have these areas that have burned before.
Right,
Why are they not burning now?
yeah.
So depending on the severity of the fire, like how intense it was when I went through there in 2013, the whiskey fire, it determines how fast the vegetation is going to regrow. So I
So
have,
it actually kills the ground.
like in some places, I've spent a lot of time up in here. There's no grass growing, there's no brush growing, there's dirt, and there's dead trees.
Oh, okay.
So it's like a mile-wide fuel break.
Right.
Because there's nothing in there that could catch fire. I mean, there's pockets of vegetation that could burn, but in general, it's not going to be able to catch
I know
on
about
fire.
hurricanes, but I don't know about fire.
Yeah. So fire scars they are what they are, but for us, they're great fuel breaks. I mean, all this is preventing the fire from moving around it for years. I mean, 2013, this is 2018, 5 years after, yeah. And it's different everywhere you go. I mean, if you're out in other parts of the state or the U.S., it can grow back in years. So, but here, it's going to take 10 years, like you said. Does that answer your question pretty good?
Thank you.
On that same note, the area in here that has burned, just because it's in pink doesn't mean it's completely black. There's patches of green. It's a mosaic pattern. So we have these to make it easy to understand the fire. Any other questions? Okay, well, I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. We're going to be hanging out by the maps, ready to answer your questions and just talk to you.